Lyddie by Katherine Paterson, adapted and abridged. Chapter 1. The Bear. The bear had been their undoing, though at the time they had all laughed. No, Mama had never laughed, but Lyddie and Charles and the babies had laughed until their bellies ached. Lyddie still thought of her younger sisters as the babies. She probably always would. Rachel had been 6 and Agnes 4 that November of 1843, the year of the bear. It had been Charles who had left the door of their cabin ajar after fetching firewood from the shed. The door didn't shut well anyway. Lyddie had been stirring the pot of oatmeal over the fire when she looked up, and there was the bear's massive black head in the doorway. His nose was sniffing, and his tiny eyes were bright with hunger. "Don't nobody yell," Lyddie said softly. "Just back up slow and quiet to the ladder and climb up to the loft. Charlie, you get Agnes, and Mama, you take Rachel." She heard her mother whimper. "Shh," she continued, her voice absolutely even. "It's all right long as nobody gets upset. Just take it nice and gentle, eh? I'm watching him, and I'll yank the ladder up after me." They obeyed her, even Mama, though Lyddie could hear her sucking in her breath. Behind Lyddie's back, the ladder creaked as Charles and Agnes, then Mama and Rachel, climbed up into the loft where the family slept. Lyddie glared straight into the bear's eyes, daring him to step forward into the cabin. Then, when she could hear her family settling on the straw mattresses above, she backed up the ladder herself. At the top, Charles dragged her onto a mattress beside her mother. The noise attracted the bear. He banged the door aside and bounded in toward the ladder, but Charles snatched it. The bottom of the ladder hit the beast in the nose, giving Charles and Lyddie time to pull the ladder up onto the platform and out of reach. The bear roared in frustration and reared up on his hind legs. He was so tall that his nose nearly touched the edge of the loft. Rachel and Agnes cried out. Their mother screamed, "Oh, Lord, deliver us!" "Hush," Lyddie commanded. "You'll just make him madder." Charles put his arms around Rachel and Agnes, and Lyddie stroked her mother's trembling shoulder. "It's all right," she murmured. "He can't reach us." But could he reach them? Lyddie tried to breathe deeply and evenly. The bear fell to all fours and began to explore the cabin. He knocked over the churning jug and licked at the blade, but Lyddie had cleaned it too well after churning the butter that morning. The bear turned over the table and benches and upended the spinning wheel. Lyddie held her breath, praying that he wouldn't break anything. Charles and she would try to mend things, but Charles was only 10 and Lyddie 13. They didn't have their father's skill or experience. "Don't break nothing," she begged silently. They could not afford to replace any of the household goods. At last the beast found what he had smelled from the beginning. The kettle of oatmeal was hot and bubbling over the fire. The bear thrust his head deep into the kettle, but when his nose met the boiling porridge, he howled with pain. He threw back his head, jerking the kettle off the hook, which fell over his head like a black pumpkin. Too stunned to let it fall off, the bear danced around the room in pain with the boiling oatmeal raining down his thick neck and coat. Trying to get out of the cabin, he accidentally pushed the door shut. Battering it with his kettle-covered head, he tore it off its leather hinges and loped out into the dark. They heard him crashing through the bush until the November night became quiet once more. Then they began to laugh. Rachel first, throwing back her dark curls and revealing where her baby teeth had fallen out. Then Agnes joined in with her shrill 4-year-old voice, and next Charles's not yet manly giggle. Whew, Lyddie said. Lucky I'm so ugly. A pretty girl couldn't have scared that old rascal. You ain't ugly, Rachel cried. But they laughed louder than ever, Lyddie the loudest, until the tears of relief ran down her thin cheeks and her belly cramped and doubled over. When had she laughed so much? She could not remember. Her mother's shoulders were shaking, but Lyddie couldn't see her face. Mama must be laughing too. Lyddie dared to hope that her mother might laugh. Yes, they had to mend the door and clean up the mess, and the porridge was wasted. But the bear must have dropped the kettle close by. Tomorrow she and Charles would find the bear's trail of broken underbrush and retrieve it. Let Mama be laughing, she prayed. Mama, she whispered in her ear, you all right, eh? Her mother whirled around. It's the sign, she said. What sign, Mama? Lyddie asked, though she did not want an answer. Clarissa said when the end of the world would draw near, the devil would walk the earth. That weren't no devil, Mama, Charles said. It were only a black bear. Mama answered with a Bible verse. Your adversary, the devil, prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Aunt Clarissa don't know that, Mama, Lyddie said as firmly as she could, though she shuddered. Rachel piped up anxiously. It were only a black bear, weren't it, Lyddie? Lyddie nodded, not wanting to contradict her mother out loud. Mama spoke again. Tomorrow we're going to Pulteney. I aim to be with the faithful when the end of the world comes. I don't want to be with the faithful, said little Rachel. I want to be with Lyddie. Lyddie will come too, answered Mama. But how will Papa find us if we are not home? Charles asked. Your father went out searching for vain riches. He ain't never coming back, said Mama. He will, Rachel cried. She had only been 3 when Papa had left. It was hard for the babies to go to sleep on an empty stomach. Charles helped Lyddie clean the cabin. They propped up the door and put the chest against it until they could fix it in the morning. Then Charles climbed up the ladder to bed. Lyddie stayed below. The fire must be banked for the night, covered so that it wouldn't go out. Mama sat in the one chair, a rocker she had brought from Pulteney when she came here as a bride. Lyddie stole a glance at her. She was rocking and staring in a dazed manner into the fire. The truth be told, Mama had gone somewhat queer in the head after their father had left. Not so strange as her sister, Aunt Clarissa, and her husband Judah, who was always shouting about the end of the world. But now the bear seemed to have pushed Mama too far. Don't let's go, Mama, pleaded Lyddie softly. Please, Mama. But Mama only stared at the fireplace, her eyes blank, rocking on and on. It was useless to argue for now, and Lyddie hoped Mama would be better tomorrow, as she always was. But the next morning Mama was still determined. If we don't go to Clarissa's, we'll soon have to go to the poor farm, she said. The only charity Lyddie dreaded more than Aunt Clarissa's was the poor farm. Her father had headed west to escape having to go there. I can't stop you to go to Aunt Clarissa's, Lyddie said, but I can't go with you. I can't leave the farm. When Mama tried to argue, Lyddie added, Selling our pig won't fetch enough money to provide coach fare for the lot of us. She sent Charles with Mama to make sure that Mama, Rachel, and Agnes arrived safely at Uncle Judah's farm. They would have to walk the first part of the journey because they had sold the horse cart for seeds last year. Charles loaded the wheelbarrow with Mama's trunk, which she had brought years ago to the mountain farm where they lived. Charles and Lyddie tied the old squealing sow to the wheelbarrow to be sold for traveling money. The little sisters could ride in the barrow if they got tired. "It's 10 miles to Cutler's, then you can rest in the coach," Lyddie said. She turned to Charles, who looked small in Papa's old woolen shirt. "You want I should go with you as far as the village?" But they agreed it would be better for her to tend the cow and horse and protect the house from wild critters. "You watch out for yourself," said Charles anxiously. "I'll do fine," she said. "Now remember, you got to get enough money from selling the pig to pay coach fare for everyone." "And for me to come back and help you on the farm," Charles said. He glanced back to make sure Mama couldn't hear him. "You mustn't be afraid to go down and ask Quaker Stevens for help, Lyddie. They are good neighbors, no matter what Mama says." Mama didn't approve of heathens or abolitionists. Since she considered their Quaker neighbors to be a bit of both, she forbade the children to talk with the Stevenses. "The Worthen family ain't gonna have truck with the devil," Mama would say. But, like Papa used to do, Charlie had sneakily visited the neighbors this summer with the family cow. The Stevenses had a bull, and now the Worthen's cow was pregnant. Mama hadn't said anything about that. She knew as well as Lyddie and Charles that they could never survive without the cash money that came from selling a calf every year. Lyddie didn't worry about their neighbors' radical and peculiar ways the way her mother did, but she was too proud to even think about having to ask the Stevenses for help. Lyddie needn't have worried about needing help. Charles came back in about 2 weeks, and together they made it through the winter. They shot rabbits and peeled bark off of trees for soup so their food would last longer. They ran out of flour for bread, and when it came close to time for the cow to give birth, they did what good farmers do and stopped milking her, even if it meant no more milk or cheese. On the first warm day of March, the calf was born, a heifer. She was sweet and healthy. Now the cow gave plenty of milk and cream. Lyddie and Charles felt rich as townsfolk. The same day they began to harvest maple sap to make syrup and sugar. One beautiful blue day in May, a bluebird sang in an apple tree while Lyddie's rough hands gripped the old plow. She and Charles were plowing the field with their one horse so they could plant their crops. Then Lyddie looked up to see a horse and rider coming up the dirt road. At first, she hoped it might be Papa. But it was a woman riding side saddle, and not their mother either. Mama never rode, since she fell years ago and miscarried the baby that would have been born between Lyddie and Charles. It was Mrs. Peck, the shopkeeper's wife from the general store in the village. "I thought you might be wanting this letter," said Mrs. Peck. It was from Mama. Lyddie paid a few coins for the postage from their almost empty cash box. After Mrs. Peck had left, Lyddie read the letter while Charles listened. Lyddie was not much of a reader, so it was hard work to read her mother's cramped and childish handwriting. "Dear Lyddie, the world have not come to the end yet, but we can still hop. Meantime, I have hired you out to M. Cutler at the tavern, and for your brother to Baker's Mill. The pasture, fields, and sugar bush is lent to M. Westcott to repay debts. Also cow and horse. Leave at once you get this. Your loving mother, Mattie M. Worthen." Lyddie burst into tears. "I never expected this, Charlie. We were doing so good, eh?" Charles handed her a ragged kerchief from his pocket. "It's all right, Lyddie. It's all right," he said anxiously. After a bit, he gave one of her braids a pull. and joked. "The world have not come to the end yet, eh?" He pointed to Mama's primitive spelling. "See, we can still hop." Lyddie's spelling was no better than her mother's, so she did not really see the joke at first. But Charlie laughed, and so she began to laugh, though it was the kind of laughter that caught like briars in her chest and felt very much like pain.